finished watching Scrooge, so I have that song stuck in my
Me
head.
too. I finished like 10 minutes.
All right. I know. And we're recording. Welcome to the Movie Bros podcast, your favorite podcast, your favorite new podcast, where you come to watch or listen, depending on how you see this, see people talking and review their favorite movies from new and past. I am Nary Science. With me, as was last time, is Hilda. Say hi,
Hello.
Hilda.
Hi, Hilda.
And we have a newcomer today. We have Chad, which has been a friend of the podcast of the other podcast that I do for 1,000 years now. But this is his first time him and I are actually recording together. So welcome, Chad. How you doing, brother?
Good. Thank you for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. All right. So today we are reviewing. We're going to be reviewing Halloween Ends and Scrooged, 1988 Scrooge. The reason for this pairing is because since we are at the time of this recording, we are in between Halloween and Christmas. We figured we'd do both Halloween. We'd review a Halloween movie and a Christmas movie. And because I am hell bent on making this as random pairing as possible, there's nothing else that connects these two movies. There's zero. Much to the chagrin of Hilda's husband and Mike Mercadal. He's like, there's gotta be
We're
something
not the
that
same
connects them.
person.
Nothing. We're not. So welcome. For those of you who are listening in right now, just know that you could watch the video live, or you could watch it. It lives on forever on our Facebook and YouTube channels. Everything is at Movie Bros Pod. And except Twitter. Twitter's Movie Bros _pod, because for some reason Movie Bros Pod was taken, even though they don't use it. So check us out, YouTube, Facebook. Everything is at Movie Bros Pod. Check out the video there. If you're watching us on Facebook or YouTube right now, just know that you can find us on the audio. You can find the audio version wherever you listen to podcasts. So before, let's get going. Take one, movie one. Let's start talking about the 2022 Halloween Ends. We're gonna start off with the synopsis. The synopsis is, in the aftermath of Halloween Kills, a life-altering incident that shocked the community, haunted survivor Laurie Strode has spent the last 4 years trying to pick up her pieces. But with brutal mass murderer Mike Myers laying low, waiting for the right moment to strike, Laurie hopes to find closure by writing an unimpassioned memoir. In the meantime, her orphan granddaughter Allison has struck up a friendship with Haddiford's traumatized young pariah, Corey Cunningham. As pure evil infects the town, a drastic transformation occurs and a spat of senseless violence terrorizes the neighborhood. As the monster return, has the monster returned to finish off Laurie, the one who keeps escaping death? That's a weird synopsis, but that's the fucking synopsis, man. I don't know. I've never read a synopsis that ends in a question mark. It's usually like this is the plot summary, and but this one ends like, is it the plot summary? That's every time I read the questions. Every time I read a question mark. All right. So 2022 is the Halloween Ends. It came out a couple months ago. It's available to stream on Peacock. My question to you guys is, first of all, let's get opening thoughts. What are your opening thoughts of the movie? Hilda?
So I wanted to love it.
Pause.
I know. I'm like, oh, I wanted to love it so much more than I did. That being said, I did enjoy. I think what I enjoyed the most is there were all these like little hidden Easter egg like nods to the 1978 original, which we can get into those like later if you want. But I think I actually enjoyed those more than the middle part of the movie. It's like it started off and I was like, okay, I'm invested. Then it lost me for a little bit. And then like I'm cool. Again, we're doing spoilers, right? I know I asked that last time.
Yeah, sure.
I feel like I always have to clear the air. Okay, we're doing spoilers.
Spoiler warning.
Spoiler warning. Yes, if you have not seen Halloween Ends, turn us off now. But come back later and watch us.
And watch Scrooged.
So yeah. So
I think the
Come
spoiler
back in
warning on
half an
that
hour when
one
we talk
is
about Scrooge.
yeah, Scrooge.
that
I
is
think its expiration is gone, man. That one's-
that's my overall. It was like I wanted to love it more than I did. I didn't hate it. It lost me for a little bit in the middle, but I like the beginning and I like the ending.
So, question for both of you, I guess, before we get to Chad's overall. Have you guys seen the previous two newer Halloween movies, the Halloween Kills and Halloween that came out in, I believe, 2015 and 2018, 2019? I believe were the
Yeah.
years. The years might be off, but the newer
Yeah,
ones.
the
Yes.
last trilogy.
Yes, the newest
Right.
trilogy. I've seen
So
every
Okay.
Halloween movie, but yes, definitely the last two.
the
Yeah.
most recent trilogy, I should
Correct.
say. I realized watching this one that I missed one. Like
Oh no,
well, number two, like I missed the last one. I
The
saw
Halloween Kills?
no, that's the best one.
Oh,
yeah,
that's the
I
best
know.
one.
And I was
Oh
like,
no.
oh, yeah, exactly. But realized that too late.
Oh,
Did
did
you
you
go
go
back
back
and
and
watch
watch
it?
it?
No, I'm gonna have to now.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh no. You
Yeah.
should turn off the podcast now and go back and watch it.
No, it's cool. Like I'm okay with some spoilers for this. So like
All
I think
right. Chad?
Michael survives into the third one, just so you know.
Yeah,
Uh,
you've learned that now.
I
oh,
kind of
Chad,
got
what are your
that
thoughts
by
on this
the
movie?
synopsis of this one and watching this one.
so basically, very akin to Hilda, I really, really wanted to love this movie because I loved the first one. Second one left me even higher than that. And then the third one went in a different direction. Didn't really buy where Laurie ended up at the beginning of the movie because I'm like, this is a woman who sat around waiting for this guy for what was it, 30, 40 years.
40
And she's
What are we? We're at 44 years.
yeah, so
From
she's
the-
gonna give up after a couple years because he disappeared. But whatever. Other than that, I did like the acting. I thought they did a good job with Jamie Lee. Always is amazing. I loved the daughter's transformation because she was kind of going, bad girl psycho for a little bit. And then the main guy, the outcast, brain deading on his name suddenly. Corey. He was very interesting. Honestly, and I know this happens way too often in horror movies, particularly. It feels like there was a horror movie based around him, and then they didn't know what to do with it, and so they slapped Michael Myers onto it. That's really what he felt like. But his journey was also very interesting. Just it wasn't his. It should have been Michael's movie, not Corey. We're not here for Corey. But
that's exactly where they lost me, Chad. That's exactly where they lost me because I wanted it to. I was like, this is an interesting story in the movie. This is an interesting movie.
Yeah.
But this is not the movie I was expecting.
Exactly.
So
what do you think, Neri?
Yeah, so I'm with Chad on the first one. So I'm not a big horror movie guy. Like I don't like horror movies for the most part. I don't like horror movies because I'm a pussy. I am a self-proclaimed like wuss. I get scared. I have to watch them during the daytime. If I for some reason watch them at night or whatever reason, I'm gonna end up watching Disney movies to go to sleep. Like it's not a sort of thing, right?
you need a palate cleanser.
I understand. Absolutely.
Right,
I
correct.
understand.
Correct. So a few years ago, my friends Jeff and Dave started Shiver, the horror movie podcast, which is on the Geek Bro Network, which is part of this. We're on the network now. Go to geekbro.net. Anyways, so I was brought into that episode. I was brought into that podcast for two reasons. One, back then we weren't doing virtual like this. We were doing like everybody has to meet at each other's house, and I was the only one with recording equipment. One, two. I was brought in as the comic relief. Like, this is the guy who's a pussy, so let's make him watch these horror movies and scare the hell out of him. So that was the shtick, and I was more than happy to abide. I was like, that's fine, whatever. But the funny thing is, the more horror movies I started watching, I only took part of like, I don't know, 18, 19 episodes, and I was like, oh, so now I've become like more, I don't want to say desensitized, but I'm like, it's become my it's I don't know. I have a stronger threshold for them now. So, the original Halloween, not the original 1960 whatever 70 whatever. I'm talking about this trilogy. When it came about, it was right around that time that Shiver podcast was happening, and I was all for it. And so I watched it with like, oh, this is really cool. Then Halloween Kills came out, and I was like, this is amazing. Like I was really like loved Laurie's transformation to the badass chick and the traps and all that shit. I thought it was great because again, it feeds into the action guy movie that I love, right? So it feeds into that.
True.
And then I saw this one. So here's the problem. First of all, I already knew, not that I knew, but I had gotten, there were so many people on my feed who absolutely hated this movie. So I didn't know why they hated the movie, but the way they were talking about it, one of our listeners, Carlos Navarrete, he literally was like, why? Why would they do that? Why would they do that to this movie? And I was like, wow, this is like, again, I don't know what was happening, but I was like, wow, these people. So they felt really strongly about it. So I started
Yeah.
watching this movie. And then when this guy, spoiler alert, Corey goes in and tells Michael, show me how it's done. I was like, oh, fuck off. I was just like, so like, this is so much bull. I'm like, this is no, come on, man. This is really, you're gonna take an apprentice. Now he's gotta teach you how to stab somebody with a fucking knife. This is not a teachable thing. This is what's going on here. So I was like in that mindset. So I kind of felt like I knew where the movie was gonna go because of that, right? But then the third act came and they got rid of Corey. And I was like, okay. You threw me through a little loop in the middle. I felt that I knew where the movie was gonna go halfway through the movie, but I was wrong. All right. I concede. You're right. Here we go. And this is one of those things I talk about with Mike all the time. Where it's like I was just along for the ride, and the ride out in the middle took me somewhere where I didn't want to go, but it was only to throw me off of where, like, oh no, now it's gonna, you know what I mean? So I was okay. I like this movie. I will say, to give all of that disclaimer, I am not a diehard Halloween fan. I think the original Halloween was good, and then they all start falling off from there. I haven't seen Halloween H2O
Oh my
because
god,
you
that's
know
the one you
LL,
definitely have to see.
Yeah,
that because
that
of
one I
LL
saw
Cool
in
J.
theaters.
Yeah, I haven't seen
I
I
that one
think
because
that
LL
was
Cool
the
I
J
first one
really
I
I
saw in
really
got
theaters.
liked
refused.
that Rob Zombie one in like 2007. That
Oh,
one was
absolutely.
that one was
Yeah, I
great.
haven't. Yeah. So I
Add
feel
that one to
like
your
the
list,
from
Neri.
the one with the movies, the one with the with with this chick, Jamie Lee Curtis, like they all just start falling. And at one point, I think part 3 is about witches, and then part 4
Yes,
he gets
nothing. Almost.
supernatural powers.
Yeah, it's almost nothing to do with Michael
Yeah, yeah,
It
or
yeah,
doesn't.
Jamie. I think they show
yeah,
there's
yeah.
like
Part
a
3 has
news
nothing to
No,
do
clipping of
it's
him in the
like
background. That's it.
yeah, yeah.
he's not
And
in
then
it at all.
part
But
4
that's one of the
he gets
nods.
supernatural, right? Isn't part 4 where he becomes supernatural and you're like,
That's
what
where
the fuck is
that's
happening?
they've always kind of portrayed him as somewhat supernatural. Like, yeah, he's a man. He was born clearly, but they never have any explanation how he can take bullets to the head,
Right.
stab multiple times, etc., and still get up and keep going. So they, starting with 4, though, you're right. They start trying to tie, kind of like what they did with Jason, like tie a mystical factor to Michael, and then it just kind of dives there until it reboots in H2O, and it kind of
At
ignores the
least Jason,
mystical until
they did a better job of
the new one.
they did a better job of explaining it with Jason, right? With the lightning bolt in the
Mm.
graveyard, and it's like, oh, that's okay. That's where he gets.
Well,
Anyway,
yeah, and the
but
psychic chick and all that. Yeah, there's a whole. At least there,
yeah,
there's something.
they tried better. So, anyways, going back to Halloween, I dug this movie. I do think it's the weakest of this new trilogy. I do think that. But it's an excellent trilogy. So it's not bad. It's Chad, we were talking, Hilda and I were talking about Back to the Future 2 last week, and we were like, which
Yep.
is your favorite Back to the Future movie? And we were like, we couldn't make up our minds. And then it's like there still has to be a weak link in that movie, right? It doesn't, not that any one of those movies are bad, but there still has to be one that you watch less than others. And
Absolutely.
that's how I feel about Halloween Ends. I think it's a good movie. It's definitely the least of the, like, if the Halloween trilogy were my children and then the school called, I'd be like, what did Halloween Ends do? Like that was that's my initial. I'd be like, I know this is the problem child. What did it do? So
True.
but I enjoyed it. I thought it was decent. I thought it was not, whatever. So the
Yeah, I
acting was
thought.
superb.
Yeah.
I bought into Laurie's transformation because it fed into it gave a good explanation of like, look, I spent 40 years being afraid of this guy, and I'm fucking done. I'm done being afraid. I'm done living in fear. And that whole message of having fear consume you, it consumed the town and made them all it made them all monsters. Like they were
Right.
all they, you know what I mean? And I dug it. Maybe that's my liberal heart, my liberal bleeding heart. I don't know. I was like, don't
No,
let hate consume you.
it's not a bad take, and I'm not saying it's unreasonable. Like it came out of nowhere, but I just
Right.
in my version of Lori, she would have kept hunting until one of them was dead. Like she would never have stopped. Um, like
Especially
to me,
after
she's like
Halloween Kills. Especially
right.
after Halloween Kills, that was a big drop off. Yeah.
Yeah, they basically turned her in like into a Van Helsing type, particularly in this trilogy, though more or less in the other movies as well. At the like H2O and stuff like that. Once she started going, but the yeah, so that was the only thing that bothered me. And then the real thing, the place where obviously I besides Corey and his whole storyline, the thing that bothered me the most was from 2 to 3. Particularly, they spent 1 and 2 building Michael up to be that the more he killed, the more he transformed. Like it was almost becoming transcendent, like something he was turning into something else. The more the town feared him, the more they hated him, the more he killed. I mean, that's like the whole point of the ending of 2, right? Like they had stabbed him, shot him, beat the hell out of him. All of a sudden, and then he gets back up, and now he's killing everybody like he's a machine. Oh, and that was the whole point. And then he just disappears and becomes an old.
And then like
well,
2/3
yeah,
of this
well,
movie, he's just a recluse. Like
right.
you just
what I
went to
mean,
this tunnel
think,
under a bridge and
yeah,
Right.
you're like,
yeah,
I'm just a hermit now. Like until this kid
yeah.
finds me
What
and
So
like
here's why I buy
pulls me.
that. Here's why, and I agree with you. It is like what's going, but here's why I was okay with it is because, like we said earlier, the town became the monster. So I think that he became this whole thing where it's like he he was her boogeyman,
Right.
and he infested the town so that everybody became the boogeyman, and that's what we saw in part 2. Spoiler, sorry, Hilda. And
Cool. That's my bad for not watching it.
yeah, yeah,
I think they go into it a lot in 3 anyway, or
yeah.
it ends. But it was just,
Yeah.
but they seemed like they were going on a trajectory and then didn't know what to do with it. Like, okay, so now we've transcended Michael. Michael's become something else. So he becomes an old guy in the sewer. Okay.
Yeah, I feel you. I feel you. I think if they should have just given him 4 mutated turtles, and then that's
And a rat.
that's what I felt was going
if
on with Corey. I was like, teach me how to do it. I was like, teach you how to do it, how to stop somebody with a fucking butcher knife. What's going
it'd be
on?
funny if you put Jamie Lee as Shredder. I guess that is it becomes a whole new dynamic.
You,
That's a
yeah,
whole other mashup. Now we have to do Halloween and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
I'm in. I'm down.
They got to
So
do 2 though, because the other ones don't have the rap song. You got to have Ninja Rap.
Now I know I mentioned a little earlier, but like I did appreciate a lot of the little nods to the 78 Halloween. I loved that her hairstyle was a throwback to the 1978 Lori hairstyle. I loved that that blue font. This is my designer brain. Like that looks familiar, and it's the same font and color that they used in Season of the Witch on the opening credits on this one. Like that blue font, like things like that. When she's in the kitchen, there's like a picture on the wall, and it's her 2 friends that were killed in the 78
yeah.
I
the
saw that
78
too.
movie.
Yeah, I noticed that.
There's that scene where she's like up in the window and she looks down and she sees Corey and he's like peeking out from the hedge. That's like a direct recreation of her seeing Michael like peeked out from behind a hedge.
Well, and also her looking out the window is the whole thing. Michael was always looking out the window,
right? Exactly.
Out of his house.
He was like, yes, exactly. Like, so all of those little things, like all those little things stood out to me where I'm like, oh, look at all these cool little throwbacks. And there were some in the beginning and there were some at the end. And that when I was saying like, I did love the ending, what I actually really loved about the ending is the empty rooms. Because they did that same thing in the 1978 Halloween. But in the 1978, it was like dark and kind of like foreboding, like this is going to continue. And in this one, it's going through all the rooms and it's like sunny and serene and the rooms are really calm. And it's kind of like this whole thing has just come to an end.
Right.
Like it's just done.
So 2 things that I want to talk about. One, and Hilda, this is gonna be a spoiler for you since you haven't seen Halloween Kills.
Go for it.
That black sheriff with the hat, that was a pretty big deal. What he said in this movie, he only had one line in this movie, but that was a very big deal because it was a complete and utter contrast to his entire character in part two. In
Oh,
part two, he was trying to keep the peace, and he was like, "Don't," and he was telling the entire town that was literally at one point with fucking pitchforks and like it was really bad outside. They were like, "Fucking kill him," and he was the one trying to tell the town, "Do not become the monster.
Right.
Do not do this. We cannot be the judge, jury, and executioners. We have to. There's a law. There's a system in place. We gotta follow the law." Like he was that character the entire part two, and he was a major character in part two. And for him to show up at the end of this movie, and his only line was, "We don't." When they say we don't do, that's not the way it's done, and he said, "It is tonight."
it is tonight.
It actually that's a huge deal because I was like, even him,
Yeah.
like that's like
He was
this
like,
guy's
"We're done."
character was completely Johnny Law last time, and then now he's like, we got to get rid of this fucking evil man. We got to do it. There's no trial. This is the way it's going to be done tonight, and that's a big deal. So one, that, and then the other thing I want to talk about is the first 10, 15 minutes of this movie. It really threw me off. It did a great job because it's a Halloween movie, so you're expecting Michael Myers to like, oh shit, Michael Myers, and it did. I'm feeding into the theme. I just bought into the theme where I was like, oh, the paranoia is the new monster, the fear is the monster, and
Yeah.
you don't need the actual physical quote unquote shape of Michael Myers because this kid, and I felt my heart went out to this kid, man. My heart went out to this kid whose life, I just kept thinking like, oh my God, that could be anybody who like
Absolutely.
he
Yeah.
just was overcome with fear, kicked open the door, and then this fucking kid fell and died. And it's like, oh my, and then from the point of view of the parents, as a parent, just
Oof.
imagining walking into my house and seeing my kid fall to their death right in front of me. I couldn't even like it's just so many levels where I was like, and I dug it so that whole 10-15 minute scene because I was waiting for Michael Myers to pop out of the corner, like, oh, this guy's gonna get it. This guy, oh, the dad's an asshole. This guy's gonna get got, and I just thinking though, and then they threw me for, and I was very impressed with how they threw me for a loop. I dug it. I mean, I don't know how you guys felt about it, but
Yeah, no, the opening scene definitely threw me for a loop. I was much like you, waiting for Michael to come and like show how a little bit of how he transformed or how whatever. I don't know what I was thinking he was going to do like with his initial appearance, but I knew something was going to happen or I thought something was going to happen with Michael, and then that whole trick, like you said, with the kid, getting kicked over the thing because the other guy is freaking out, was just a prank gone horribly, horribly wrong. And then, yeah, from like you said, from the point of view of the parent, one thing I've noticed since I've had a kid, that kids in horror movies hit me way different than they did before that. Like before, I was like, yeah, get him. He's a slow teenager. Go get him. Now I'm like, yeah, I can't do it anymore.
It's funny how, and I hate to be that guy, but it's funny how becoming a parent really does change you, and like even in watching movies. Chad, have you watched the the Disney animated movie Tarzan since having a kid?
Oh yeah,
if watching that movie or any Disney movie really, but I picked that one specifically because it's that whole thing about like adopted parents and like you're my mom no matter what and blah blah blah. But I remember that was one of my all-time favorite Disney movies before even having a kid, and then having a kid, I couldn't get through the intro where I like just bawling. I was just like, oh my God. And I was like, what is wrong with me? And it's because fucking dumb children that I have.
Yeah, absolutely. It takes me. Like, I can't. I could barely watch the remake of Pet Sematary. I don't know if you guys ever watched the old one.
I never got to it because the original scared the bejesus out of me. And I don't know if I was ready for that.
Do you well, whatever. It's stories. The baby boy gets hit eventually. And I spent the whole movie dreading that because my son was about 4 or 5 when the remake came out, and that's how old the kid was in the movie. And I was like, "Oh, this is going to be terrible." And of course, they flipped it and did some other stuff, but it was still the whole movie. I was dreading it, And even when it came, I was like, it's the first time I like turned my head in forever.
Yeah.
It's
So
rough even if you don't have kids. I can't imagine being a parent like seeing. Now, it's funny because I would rather watch slashers. Little kids in horror movies scare the crap out of me. Like
Mm.
movies like Annabelle and The Omen with like
oh yeah,
creepy little children that are like
Yeah.
possessed by
Children of
something.
the Corn.
That's scarier to
Children of the
me
Corn.
than like the Michael Myers like slasher guy who's coming in to like murder everyone at a camp.
Well, it's because they
Creepy
take
little possessed like paranormal with
well, it's because they take
small
that innocence
children. I'm
of
like,
they take that innocence of childhood and just twist it and run you right
that's
through
terrifying. Like haunted mini humans.
it.
Ooh,
I
like
I think
that's
it's super. I
weird.
agree. I think children in horror movies are super terrifying because they cost their parents a lot of money to begin with, and then they're gonna end up killing their parents. Like, oh Jesus! First you kill my
Double
wallet, now
stab.
you kill me. Jesus! Oh my God! So much.
Like
Yeah,
that
yeah.
movie,
I don't
The
know.
Orphan, with the little girl who's not a little
Yeah.
girl. Like they think she's like
I
8,
haven't
but
seen
she's like
I
30.
haven't seen the movie, but everybody says the same thing about that one. It's brutal. It's
Yeah.
brutal.
Well, the ones that
one of
were
those.
that always hit me were children ghosts, like particularly the ghosts of children. I forget what was it? The Haunting, the one with Liam Neeson. They go to a haunted house. I think it was supposed to be a haunting of Hill House, but they did it a different way. But anyway, it had a bunch of
The one
people in it,
with the
including
one with Nicole Kidman.
no,
Oh,
that was the
that was good.
others.
The others. The others.
The others,
I saw
yeah.
that in a
Yeah.
drive-in.
Oh,
Oh,
that would
cool.
be cool. But no, this was it had Liam Neeson, oh god, Owen Wilson. I'd have to, if you saw the cast, you would know who they are. A bunch of them
Yeah.
are still famous.
Yeah, I'd have to look it up.
But anyway, they had like children ghosts because the guy was basically a child killer, who had owned the house and was running that place. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But they had the children ghosts floating around in like the curtains and everything, and I was like, couldn't do it.
You know what's so I did this in the last one too, but I like to look up like budget and how much it made. Like that
Sure.
I love doing that kind of stuff. So while
Yeah.
I was looking up that information, I found a fun fact about this movie. Remember the party scene where Corey goes to the party and that guy like has the trench
Yes.
coat?
Yeah.
So that's Nick Castle, who is the actor who played the original Michael Myers.
No shit. Awesome.
And it's the first time he's appeared in the franchise without the mask.
Right.
So I thought that was a little fun fact. But yeah, to get back to budget, this had a budget of $33 million to make, compared to the 1978 original budget, which was an indie film, which only had $300,000. And as of November 6th, Halloween Ends had made almost $103 million.
Awesome.
And that's pretty big considering the fact that it came out to watch for free on Peacock.
Right.
Like,
right.
You know what I mean? Like, people still chose to go to the movie theater even though they had the opportunity to watch it at home, which I think is a big deal.
That's only if you let me look at the calendar. So it came out on October 14th, and 103 million was by November 6th. So that's only 3 weekends. That's only 3 weekends in theaters, and then it was available for free on streaming if you had free if you had a subscription to Peacock. So, and another fun fact: it came out almost exactly 44 years to the date of the premiere of the original 1978 film, which debuted on October 25th, 78. This one came out on October 14th. 44 years.
Pretty close.
Pretty cool, man. It was rated by critics at 41% on Rotten Tomatoes, and the audience score is 57%. And I think it's a very divisive. That Corey plot line is very divisive. I've heard most people that I've heard, and again, the amount of people is not a lot, but I've heard like 4 or 5 people who did not like that, and it was just that one thing. And I think that's a very divisive plot line. It's like, you made a decision.
Yeah.
This is all right. That's the choice you made. Okay. I remember as I was watching the movie, and when Corey says, "Teach me how," I was like, "All right, you made a decision. This is where you're going." Like, you know what I mean? I was just like, "Okay, you." I don't know. Have you ever heard? Have you ever seen? It's gonna sound like I don't know, like I'm talking about something completely different, but I'll land the plane. I promise. There's an interview with what's her name from The Quiet Place. I forget her name already.
Oh, Mary Poppins. What's her
Yes,
name? Oh God,
yes,
I know who you're talking about.
yes.
But yes,
Right. Kaczynski's wife.
the new Mary Poppins, I should say.
I was
Let's
like,
not
The new
I
Mary.
was like, Julie
let's not
Andrews.
let's not go against Julie
No,
Andrews.
I was
no,
like,
no.
Oh
Anyways, so
yes, but
she was talking about
Kaczynski's wife.
she was talking about when her baby was born, and that the nurse came over to her, and the nurse was like, "You have such a beautiful baby," and she says, "Thank you, Louise, but I'm sure you say that to our other new moms." She's like, "No, when it's an ugly baby, I go up to the moms and I say, 'You had a baby.'" And that's all. Like there's no like there, right? And that I say all of that to say that was my reaction when I first started when I was first watching the movie, and then Corey goes, "Show me how to kill." I was like, "You made a decision. This is this as a filmmaker, you guys as writers, this is you guys decided, okay, this is where we're going." And I thought we were going in one place, and again, that was a dope scene though when he says, "If I can't have her," and then he stabs himself. I was
Yes,
like, "Oh,
yeah,
that is cool as shit." I was like, "Oh, that's dope." All right,
yeah.
all right.
I thought that was a pretty neat moment where he was basically, it's like, okay, I can't do it. I've already ruined everything. So let me take kind of Lori out with me. If like you said, if I
Yeah,
can't have her, then you're not gonna have her either. And yeah, it's because
it was perfect the way it looked like she was
she
framed. I was like,
murdered
"Oh,
him.
you
Yeah,
framed her
absolutely.
perfectly." And the whole time I was like, "Don't touch the knife, don't touch the knife." And then of course, fucking stupid people in horror movies touching knives.
Oh, always.
Um,
It's like
Yeah.
none of these
Shout
people
out
have
to
ever seen
Lori
a
for
horror movie.
for being a survivor of countless amount of knife attacks, for
Right?
the amount of butcher knives that she had in her drawer. Jesus, shout out to her. She's like, let me just buy 77 more butcher knives. What's the worst that can happen?
She
I don't know,
leaned into
Lori.
it.
she's like, I'm gonna
What
stash one in every room for the day he shows up. I'm gonna be ready. There's
I'm
gonna be
gonna be
like
ready.
6 in every room.
every room just ready.
Gonna have like the roller to make my pie and a butcher knife. I'm gonna have my knitting
Yeah,
needles and a butcher knife. I'm gonna
yeah.
have my typewriter and a butcher
They're just like
knife.
taped under every desk, every couch. There's just a butcher knife taped. That'd be
Yeah,
amazing.
dude,
She's
that's
like
how
the
I would
Dwight.
live. I'd be like, I want them within like 5 feet of me at all times.
Absolutely.
She's like the Dwight Schrute of, of knife with knives. She's like, there's like nunchucks here and there's like knives here. All right.
She's
So
the
what
MGMT
would you give?
character.
What would be your rating between 1 and 5, Hilda? What would be your rating? Remember, let's try to make it fun. As far as the system itself is 1 to 5. I don't know, knitting needles. I don't know, 1 to 5. What would you give it?
I'm gonna go 3 to 5 burned pies because she burned that pie in the beginning.
3 out of 5 burnt pies. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Chad, what would be your rating system and what would be your rating?
uh, I'm gonna have to give it a 2.5. Metal grinders.
Oh, good. Yeah,
Oh,
that's a good one.
2.5 metal grinders. Okay.
Crunchy.
Crunchy.
Okay. I'm gonna give it 4 out of 5 scarecrow masks. Uh for
Oh
some reason that
yeah.
scarecrow mask was way scarier than the fucking Michael Myers mask. I was like, oh my god, please don't put that shit on.
Corey's mask was
Um
was weird.
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
very.
it was calling back to Michael's original mask. Like
Yeah,
the
yeah, it
white
was.
mask
Yeah.
is not his first mask. It was the
No, of course,
mask.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Um
it was like those plastic masks that you wore
Right.
like in the 80s where you use just like the plastic jumpsuit with a little tie in
yeah,
the back and
Yeah.
with the string over
that
your,
was your
yeah, and you
costume.
can't
Yeah.
breathe. You got to look
Yes.
through the nostrils of the mask.
Oh
Oh, brutal.
God, they were terrible.
All right, so to the listener, that I think is the general consensus of this movie. Is kind of all over the place. We had a 2.5 and we had a 3 and we had a 4. This is kind of the way I've heard other people talk about this movie. They either hated it or loved it. Hilda's kind of in between both worlds, and I mean, 3 is a recommendation. That is a recommendation. You know what I mean. Whenever you hear about 3 out of 5, that is, see it. But it is definitely the weak link of this new Halloween trilogy. I will
Absolutely.
acknowledge that, because the other two are 5 and 5 pluses, man. I mean, the other two movies are fantastic for me, anyways.
Yeah.
All right,
I've watched it multiple times, so I agree.
yeah, I try to keep a body count in part 2, and I just
Oh
couldn't.
God, you can't.
It was so difficult to keep a
The
body count.
counter's
I was
just
like,
gonna
"Thank
go
God."
crazy at the last 10 minutes.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah. Um, all right, and then you like, did he die? Did that person die? Did he just get burned? What happened? Like, it's hard to keep a body count. All right, so that's a wrap on take one. That's a wrap on Halloween Ends. And so that's a wrap. Thank you very much for that. Take two. We're moving on to the movie Scrooged, 1988's Scrooged, which has become a classic, a Christmas classic. The plot summary is: a selfish, cynical television executive is haunted by three spirits bearing lessons on Christmas Eve. Francis Xavier Cross is a cynical, mean spirited television executive. He treats his loyal assistant with contempt. He just sacked, which is hilarious because it's clearly you could tell who wrote this is not from this country. He just sacked a member of the staff on Christmas Eve for simply disagreeing with him, and he's alienated himself from his brother, who still insists on inviting Frank to Christmas dinner, despite him refusing to go out every year. However, Frank is forced to learn the true meaning of Christmas when he's visited by three ghosts. Um, so that's the synopsis, the plot summary. Let me see here. We have a comment. Hold on, we have a comment. Chris says here that the internet made it sound like Halloween Ends was a dumpster fire, but after watching it, it was actually wasn't, and I enjoyed it. I'm with you, Chris. I believe the same thing. I actually acknowledge this. I think the same thing. The internet, again, it was like split down the middle from my algorithm was people who hated it, and they never gave spoilers, thankfully, but they just people who hated it were very vocal about it, and people who liked it were like, no, it was good, I liked it. That was it. And people who hated it were like, this deserves to die, its children deserve to die, nobody deserves to like, oh Jesus, all right.
People
um
need to be more like, three burnt pies. Just and it's like it's not bad,
absolutely.
it's not great.
three burp,
If you like
you
it,
know
it's cool.
But at the end,
Yes.
I actually agree with that because three burnt pies, yeah, they're burnt, but they're still pie.
They're still
They're still,
pies. I
they're
Uh,
mean,
still
like
pie.
Nothing wrong
you
with
peel
pie.
off that top layer, like that cinnamony apple stuff is still pretty good inside.
That's it. You just scrape the little excess, just scrape it with a butter knife, and you're fine.
Yeah.
So
Uh,
just to be clear, I would like to point out
anyways,
that I did enjoy it, but my rating is still 2.5 Metal Grinders. Oh, because
no, I get it.
my
We get
level
it.
of
Yeah, yeah.
enjoyment
That's. I mean, it's fine.
is fine, but like I love horror movies to the point where I'll watch crappy horror movies and still get an enjoyment out of them
So, Chad, let
because
me ask you a
they're just
question.
fun.
Going back to Halloween Ends for a split second here.
Sure.
Let me ask you a question. Would your rating be? Is your rating based or influenced at all by the previous two installments of the film?
Yes,
Like,
I
are
mean
you
it
rating
wouldn't
it?
stand.
Would you rate it differently if it was just based on this one movie?
Yeah, I would give it at least. I would up it to a 3 if it was just by itself.
Okay.
Maybe even a 3.5 because it was. I didn't stop it. I didn't pause. I stayed. Like it wasn't like something I kept coming back to because I got bored or whatever. I
Okay.
did sit there the whole time. I watched it on streaming and watched it and I loved it, or at least like in the moment. So it had me. It just when you compared it to this where I thought and it seemed the story was going from the other two, it just completely went, way to
Right.
the off track.
Right.
So yeah, I would give it somewhere between a 3, maybe a 3.25. I'll be a compromise.
That's a fair point. No, I was just asking,
Yeah.
but that's a fair thing. It's natural to be like, well, this is part of a movie franchise, and this is how I feel about that movie franchise, and that's fine. I was just asking out of curiosity. All right, so
Sure.
moving on to Scrooge, 1988, Bill Murray classic. This is, as if anybody who listens to the Mount Geekmore podcast, we have previously done episodes about our Mount Rushmore of or Mount Geekmore of Christmas / holiday movies, and this is always ranked in my top 4. Like, this Scrooge is one of my all-time favorite Christmas movies, and I've said this before. It is the first time I saw any version of Charles Dickens' Scrooge was this movie. So
Really?
later on, as a child, watching like the Muppets Christmas Carol, I was like, oh, this is like Scrooged. That was my reaction as a child. I'm like, oh, they're copying Scrooged, and it's like, no, that's not the way it works. Hilda, what did you think? What do you think about Scrooge?
I'm like, side note, I love a Muppets Christmas Carol.
Of course,
Who doesn't? Who
facts.
doesn't? Who
Facts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
doesn't? It's fact.
Yeah.
It's a
The
fact.
little rats where
You
they're
know
like,
what? I don't want to be friends with
"Hey,
anybody who was like, fuck a Muppets Christmas Carol. I was like, oh my God, we
Right?
can't be friends. I don't, yeah.
Where? What heart do you have? Like,
right?
Yeah, seriously.
I actually had to rewatch this one this week because I hadn't seen it probably in about 15 years. It had been a long time since I had put this one on, and when we were talking about movies, Nary and I was were like, oh, Scrooged, and it popped up because I was looking for stuff, and this one actually came out Thanksgiving weekend, which is
uh,
next week. So for those that want to tie in, this one came out 34 years next week is when it came out. So it had been a long time since I had seen it. It still holds up from what I remember. For some reason, I didn't remember Bill Murray being as yelly as he was. For
Oh,
some reason,
yeah.
I had forgotten that, but it just made me laugh. So I enjoyed rewatching it. I feel like it just kind of brought me back to a different time. So it was a good rewatch. So for someone who hadn't seen it in like 15 years, it holds up.
Mhm. Chad?
you're I'm right there with you. It's definitely on my top 4 or 5 freaking horror, not horror movies, Christmas movies.
I mean,
So
it could be a horror
not
movie.
awesome, not
It's
far from a
great.
horror
Like,
movie, depending on where you're at. This was actually I saw this one in the theater with my grandmother. My Mima would not notice rate. She didn't understand ratings. So she would just take me to whatever I told her to take me to. And we sat there and watched this, and it scared the bejesus out of my 8-year-old self when the Ghost of Christmas Future came up.
Yeah.
But the rest of it was amazing. This actually was not my first experience with Scrooge, though it was, or the Christmas Carol. It was my second. The first one was Mickey, the Mickey version.
Okay.
mm,
And
Okay.
so I based everything on that. That was kind of my basis for comparison.
Okay.
And of course I read this. I was read the story when I was a kid, but or at least the very shortened child version that they put in schools or whatever.
Thank God. I was like, man. Am I that much of an idiot that I wasn't reading Dickens at oh my God. I was like, wow, I was so
No,
impressed with you. Yeah, I
don't read
literally,
Dickens at
Chad, the
8.
moment you said that, I was like, and that's why he's a lawyer now. That makes sense. Like, I was like, in my mind, I was like, wow, like, our paths were meant to be. Like, the guy who didn't read Dickens as a child is now a comedian, and the guy who did read Dickens as a child is now a lawyer. There you go. That's the two.
I did read Moby Dick at a ridiculously young age, but that was a slog. Like Moby Dick is not good. But I was so into whales and sharks and stuff that whatever. That's a 3-hour conversation. Anyway, the as far as Bill Murray is a god amongst men, in actors and comedians and everything. Just everything he's in somehow is greater because he is in it. I've always enjoyed him since I think the first thing I ever saw him was Ghostbusters when I was around 7 or 8. That's when my parents really kind of took the leash off and let me watch a whole bunch of movies that I probably shouldn't have.
Oh, the 80s.
Right. Yeah. I mean, our fantasy stories were like a never-ending story. Yeah. Thank you
Yeah.
for ending
yes,
my
we need to do that
childhood.
one. I'm putting
Um,
a pin in that, Nary. Never ending
Yeah.
story.
never-ending story.
Never-ending
Great
story.
movie, but man, that was a hard lesson to learn with our tax. Anyway,
We need to do an episode on childhood trauma.
yes,
Yeah.
that would be awesome. I have many.
Traumatic moments in 80s
Gremlins
movies.
and Gremlins and yeah,
Gremlins.
brutal.
Absolutely. So yeah, basically really good. Held up. I just watched it today again. I meant to watch it yesterday, but a whole bunch of stuff happened, so I didn't get to it. But I mean, I've watched it over and over again since I was 8, so nearly 34 years. It never tires. It's always good.
Yeah, I watch it every so often. It's been maybe 3 or 4 years since I've seen it, but I see it. It's still in somewhat of my rotation. I love this movie so much. It's probably, like I said, been 4 years maybe. Now that I think about it, because I'm thinking about COVID, it's been 2 or 3 years, so it's probably been 4 or 5 years maybe. But I really love this movie. I will say that the last few times I've seen it, except for today, it was kind of just on in the background. Like, I wasn't really sitting down and watching it. It was kind of just playing in the background, and you just catch, a few scenes here and there. And today was the first time in God knows how long that I sat down and watched every frame of every scene. And it does hit differently when you're an adult and you have kids now. That scene
Yep.
with the kid really really got me, where I was like, oh boy, Jesus. I actually teared up when the little boy, like, again, I've seen this movie a million times, and the little boy, when he whispers and he speaks, I'm like,
Yeah, I did
son of a
too.
bitch, you got me, you got me, you got me.
And my
But
boy
it's
was sitting right next to me. We were watching it together, and yeah, I was
yeah,
like, "Come here."
yeah. I will say this
Love your
though. All
children.
right, so this is my only, and then this is my own fault, and whatever it is. I'm reading Gina Davis's book right now, and I was just at the part. I read the part yesterday where she talked about her experience with Bill Murray in the 80s, and it was not a good experience. It was
Oh,
a
that
pretty
stinks.
fucking awful experience from her point of view. And again, this isn't a like let's throw fucking, but reading her book, reading Gina Davis's book, and reading, and she didn't even like, she did, it's not like in her book she talks about like her experience filming this one movie, and he kind of like was very inappropriate with her, and like he made it like at the meeting to get the part of the movie, she like he forcefully put this back massager after she said no 4 5 6 times. He like put this back massager on her, and it was for like, in her words, for like 3 seconds. And she says, I don't think he was trying to be mean. I just think that he wanted to make sure that I would be the kind of person that could roll the punches on the set. And I don't, but that's like, she's even saying like, I don't know if this is like, but then she gives a couple other examples of him on the set of that movie yelling at her and berating her. And she still to this day, in her voice, because I'm listening to the audiobook, because God knows I don't actually read books, um, made it seem as if she still doesn't know if if he was mean for the sake of being mean, or if he was mean because he was trying to get an emotion out of her for that specific role in that movie that he did with her.
Mhm.
So it wasn't like a total Bill Murray bashing. It was like, hey man, this is the story, this is the way I remember it. I did not have a good time during that movie. And listening to that yesterday, and then watching Bill Murray today, I'm like, ugh. And then watching Bill Murray in a movie that, like Hilda pointed out, was yelly. I was like, ugh, this is not good. I don't. Who got yelled at in real life in preparation for this fucking role? Like I said, like
Yeah.
I'm like, oh no, this is.
I was looking up because I just like looking up movie facts and stuff. But I read that he actually had a lot of him and a couple other people on the cast of this. They had a lot of disagreements of like how the movie was being done, like how it was being produced with Donner, with the director. So
The
apparently
director.
there was a lot of butting heads on the set, which is like it's kind of interesting to go and like read these things again.
Yeah.
Never looked these things up before. I've seen
Right.
this movie for I don't know 20 years, on and off. Hadn't seen it in at least 15. But it was kind of funny revisiting it now and then looking up some stuff and then reading some of that kind of behind the scenes stuff of this movie. So
Right.
yes, apparently there was a lot of butting
See.
heads on the set. He was taking a break from Ghostbusters before. I'm not even sure if he wanted to do this at first, and then I don't know how he agreed to do it. Um, but he was taking a little breather. So this one was in between Ghostbusters 1 and Ghostbusters 2
Yeah.
that he did this one. So I don't
You
know.
know, and this is a perfect example. Like that information, Hilda, is a perfect example of like why the internet nowadays has taken it, makes filmmaking into a different kind of situation. Because when you hear we never heard stories like that in the 80s and 90s, right? Like us,
Right.
the audience, were never privy to, oh, they're butting heads and there's difficulties and there's reshoots. We never knew if any of these movies in the 80s and 90s had reshoots. We never, like, we were, the
Yeah,
audience was never, we never knew of that. But
yeah. I bet there was
nowadays,
some fan magazine that maybe said something like there was
right,
on
right,
the
right,
set or
right.
something.
There's like there
That
was
was it.
an article in some comic book magazine, that in Wizard magazine, and you're like, what? And
Right? Yeah.
um but nowadays everything is known, right? And nowadays everything is like they're doing reshoots for insert superhero movie here, and you're like, oh shit, Marvel has problems. And it's like, what? Like it's so weird how all that information has now taken on a life of its own now, where if you were to hear about a movie now where there's fighting and then you'd be like, well, that's it, this movie's gonna suck, and it would affect the bottom line of this movie, right? Like I
Yeah.
think that would happen. I think that's fair to say about any movie. Like if you hear about any movie, that movie that just came out with what's her name with that she directed this film that there was so much fighting going on with Chris Pine and
Oh, Florence Pugh and
Harry
Olivia.
Styles is in the movie.
Yeah, that's yeah, Florence
Yeah,
Pugh is the other actress in that.
right. So there's
Yeah,
like this whole major drama, and there's so like Chad, it's like this I wanted to see the movie when I saw the trailer. I was like, oh,
Right.
this looks cool. I want to see it. And then I heard all the drama about it. And I'm just like, I don't. It was so much celebrity, like, oh, and then this person started dating and then they don't like each other. And then I'm like, oh, I don't give a fuck about it. And I was like, it just, all that turned me off. I was like, okay,
Right.
never mind. It's not,
It's
the trailer wasn't that good. It was
it's
fine.
one of those reasons that I try not to pay attention to Hollywood gossip or what's going on every
Yeah.
set or
Yeah.
whatever, because it's like the same thing with music or art or anything. Once you get to know your heroes or everything, you find out that they're extremely flawed individuals, just like everybody else.
Yeah.
And some of them suck a lot more than others, and it just ruins the whole effect. And I would just like rather not know and divorce. Like for instance, if Bill Murray's a piece of shit in real life, well, that sucks. But it's not going to stop me from watching the movies that I fell in love with as a kid. I might not watch anything going forward, but
yeah, I'm pretty decent about separating the art from the artist, unless
that's what I do.
Unless the artist has done some egregious physical harm to somebody where I'm like, hey man,
there's a
what I mean?
line.
Like,
Yeah, there is
yeah,
eventually
There's a line.
there's definitely a line. There's definitely a line, but I'm pretty good about being able to separate the art from the artist. Like I can't listen to Michael Jackson music anymore, but I could still, watch a Bill Murray movie. But it did today watching that movie go like, who was he yelling at? Because like this, his character's yelling at people on a set. I mean,
right everywhere. Yeah,
like it's very possible like he could have actually been yelling on the set.
he
And from
literally
what
picked
Hilda's
up
saying, it probably did happen. And so,
yeah.
He pushed Bobcat to go crazy.
And I mean,
Okay, his name's Elliot. But I mean, look, he's Bobcat to like
right,
everyone.
of course.
Yeah, he's
the
always been
cameo,
Bobcat.
the actors in this one, the cameo, well, not cameos, but like the actors in this one, too, was fun to go back and watch after a long time.
Absolutely.
Like Bobcat Goldthwait was so young. You didn't realize like how young he was until I rewatched it. I was like, oh man. Honestly, before he spoke, I was like, he looks familiar. And then he spoke, and I was like, oh, that's right.
Yeah, there's only one guy that talks like he does. Oh,
The cabbie was Buster Poindexter. I forgot his real name. The hot song from the 80s. And
oh really? I didn't know that. That's
the cabbie was he the ghost of Christmas past. Yeah, that's Buster Poindexter.
Which one was your guys' favorite ghost?
Oh, that's a good question.
I liked Carol Kane because she just kept hitting him. She's just beating him up for like 30 minutes. Like,
yeah,
but she was always my favorite, but I grew up watching remember Shelley Duvall's Fairy Tale Theater?
Yes.
From the 80s?
I don't remember, no.
Oh man, Neri. So that's a fun one too to go back and watch because every single one was so star-studded. Like Robin Williams and Mick Jagger and Christopher Reeves and I mean Bernadette Peters. Like there were so many actors that did Fairy Tale Theater. But she was one of she did like the same voice and everything. And she was always like the good fairy. She was in like the Sleeping Beauty one and but yeah, she's kind of one of those 80s characters that kind of
I've seen her in a million things. I just never saw that.
Yeah, she's in so much stuff. I always associate her with Fairy Tale Theater.
The Ghost of Christmas. I think my favorite is the past. The one of past. I you know what line I never caught as a kid? I caught it today when he was like, "Oh, I'm supposed to become this bubbling," and he's like, "Yeah, that's what Attila the Hun said." And I never caught the Attila the Hun part. I'm like, oh shit, this guy. And now I want to see that movie. I want to
Yes.
see a Christmas Carol with Attila the Hun. I think that would be a fucking fantastic
Yeah.
movie.
What the hell are they gonna show him? Like, besides, like, like,
Yeah.
what is this? Oh man, that's gonna be crazy.
I always
Yeah, and
loved
then
that in this one, like it wasn't just like an exact retelling of
Yeah.
it. It was like he knew exactly what was going on. He's like, I know who you are. You're these ghosts. You're gonna try to trick me and
Right.
make me feel all bad. But it still works. Like they still trick him.
Absolutely.
Well,
Like it's
there's the new movie that just came out, with Will Ferrell and Deadpool,
oh,
and
Spirited.
it's based.
Oh,
It's
shit.
basically this. It's basically
Yeah.
Scrooged.
Ryan
It's
Oh, no
Reynolds.
shit.
like he's a
I haven't
TV
seen it.
executive.
Oh,
Yeah,
my
I haven't
God.
seen it either, but he's a TV. I don't know if he's a TV executive or maybe he's like multimedia mogul. Like he's one of those guys, like that's like a like an
Either way,
Elon Musk
you're in the
type of-
same ballpark.
Yeah,
Yeah.
either way, same ballpark.
The trailer looks funny.
And I haven't seen it yet, but it's basically the same. And then he literally says in the trailer, this guy says Deadpool. I keep forgetting his name. I think which is hilarious. I keep
Ryan
calling him
Reynolds.
Deadpool.
Ryan Reynolds. Yeah.
Ryan Reynolds literally says, I'm not gonna care. You're supposed to make me feel bad and I care, but I don't. It's not gonna happen. Like he literally says that in the trailer, and I'm like, oh, this is just like another version of Scrooge, which is another version of A Christmas Carol. But I think it's hilarious. Where I'm like, oh, all right. Shout out to them, I guess. It would be cool if they. I'm gonna see it, but it'd be cool to see if they do a wink to Scrooge.
Oh, I hope
Like
so.
even if in my mind, the way I would do it if I was Ryan Reynolds is I would say Bill Murray's character's name in that, like, oh, he's lose. You think I'm gonna lose my shit? Like, and
Frank
insert,
Ross.
whatever the
Frank
fucking
Ross.
this guy's name is.
Yeah.
I think that'd be that would be my my brain, the way it works.
Yeah, because it would make sense that he would know it because they broadcast that whole ending, technically across
Correct.
the
They
world.
broadcasted the whole ending, and that nobody talks about the fact that the homeless dude died. Okay, we're just gonna forget about that, huh? Okay, moving on, I guess.
He's like,
Sucks
I
to be
don't
that
know.
guy.
froze to death. Okay, sure. We're just moving
think-
on.
I think my
Amazing how fast
favorite.
people freeze to death in that movie. Oh,
What was your favorite? Hilda?
I was gonna
You were
say
about
no.
to
My favorite little thing in the beginning is the street musicians. I don't know if you guys ever caught that. But
Yes.
that's Miles Davis.
Miles Davis.
is it
That's
Miles
Miles
Davis?
Davis. And
Oh,
what's
I
his
didn't know
name?
that.
From-
Paul Schaefer.
and Paul Schaefer.
Yeah.
That's
From
Paul
the
Schaefer.
Schaefer. That's Miles Davis. He's like, oh, you
Wow.
fucking hacks. And I was like, that's Miles Davis,
That's
sir.
Miles Davis, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did
I
notice
was
that
like,
part. I was
you-
like, what? You want you to learn the song yesterday?
Yeah.
Bragging
It's
on.
fantastic. I, as a kid, always enjoyed the wink to the camera, even before I knew what a wink to the camera was, when Bill Murray said, feed me, Seymour, feed me. And I was like, that's like in that other movie. Like, that's how, like, I always loved that nod when I was a kid. I could not let that go. Like, and then this is so like that's basic. I would say that's the first shared universe, right? Where he
It very well could be. I mean, who knows, man?
I mean, he died. He did die, and he did die in it's his
In Little
character
Shop?
died in
Right, he did the-
Shop of Horrors. So
You know-
who knows?
do you
But
know
yeah,
what was-
I
But
always
just by the referencing, you're having shared universes. I don't know how often they used to do that in, like, say, 70s or 60s or whatever.
yeah.
There's just I haven't seen enough of the movies to know.
Mm.
I first saw. I know it's a lot off topic, but I first saw Little Shop. We had a substitute teacher in 3rd grade, and some kid brought in the VHS and was like, "Can we watch a movie?" And we were.
So kid
Wow.
brought in the
He
VHS.
was like, not.
What a
paying-
movie.
He did not care. She was not. She was like, whatever. I'm a substitute teacher. Yes, go watch. And I watched Little Shop of Horrors in school, in horror. Like I had never seen anything like this. I was
Crazy.
like,
I'm just shook that this kid
what?
brought a VCR from home.
No,
Like
he
you
just
brought
the
that in your
VHS.
book bag. You put
No,
a
he
VCR.
brought
This
the
isn't a
VHS. He
DVD.
brought
This
the
is you
tape.
brought the whole VCR with you.
No, he
No,
brought the tape.
the
We
tape.
had the we
Oh,
had the
thank
player
God.
in the classroom.
Thank God. Okay.
No,
He brought the VHS.
The VCR in the 80s were like this big. He'd be bigger
I was
than
like,
him.
that kid took a whole VCR with him. Holy
No,
shit!
he brought
Oh,
the
tape.
VHS.
Okay.
Harry.
Okay. All right. Makes sense.
Still though, it's not
Um,
like those VHS tapes were small. They were, some of them.
Yeah, it was still
Those were the
huge. It was still
betas.
huge.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
betas were really.
No, those
huge.
were the beta tapes. The beta tapes
Yeah.
were like this. And then
Yeah,
laser
so-
discs.
so
and laser
yeah,
discs
laser
were
discs.
like this.
Yeah, I
Rotten
never thought
Tomatoes.
Laserdisc were gonna do anything with that. But anyway,
Oh, I
keep going.
thought Laserdisc were going to take off. I'm like, this
You
is the
thought
new
so?
thing. It has the
Yeah,
word
it was
laser.
too bulky.
Chad, it had the word laser in the fucking name, man.
Yeah, but they cost like $200 a disc. It was
Yeah, but
ridiculous.
in the 80s, how many, come on, in the 80s, what did we have when we were kids? What did they tell us to watch out for?
Yeah,
Lasers and quicksand. And
absolutely.
I was like, oh shit, laser disc, man. It's the future. We've been saying it for 20 years.
My uncle bought into it. He got Jurassic Park and Star Wars on the big laser disc. He still has them. I'm like, don't ever get rid of that. They're probably worth way
That's
more
great.
than anything. But he had it on. It was the first time I ever heard surround sound in a house, and it was bonkers. I'll give it that. That's for sure. Like when the T-Rex roars in Jurassic Park, shook the whole house. It was awesome.
Nice. Nice. All right. So the Rotten Tomato score for Scrooged, critics have it at 69%. The audience score is at 71%. So what would be your rating and your rating system, Hilda?
This one has a soft spot in my heart, so I'm gonna go 4 to 5 punches in the face.
5 punches in the face. Chad?
All right. I mean, it has a very soft spot in my heart, so it's amazing. I love every inch of it. So 5 out of 5, and you still kind of front of me. I was gonna go kicks in the junk.
Okay. 5 out of 5 kicks in the junk. I will also go 5 and say 5 out of 5 VCRs. Christmas bonus VCRs out of 5. That was a thing. That was a thing. How great was that? That was a
Crazy.
thing where it was like either a towel or a VCR, and you're like, oh my god. And some people forget how powerful the VCR was. That this movie came out in 1988, yet the original Fast and the Furious was they were trying to stop people from stealing. The whole plot was that they were stealing VCR/DVD players, the combo players. That's the original plot of the original Fast and the Furious, is that there was a gang hijacking trucks stealing DVD/VCR combos. Just gonna go and put that out there. The VCR lasted a long fucking time, man.
It was a powerful piece of media. I mean, even just to segue into law, it literally set the tone for how we can do a lot of what we can do now. Like this kind of technology where we can live stream probably would have been eaten up by the companies if that case hadn't gone a different way. Because they were like trying to stop. You can't record on a VCR. That's copyright infringement. All this stuff. Corwit's like, no, no, it's not.
You're never gonna stop us from putting a little piece of tape over that cassette. You're never gonna stop us, bro. Come on, man. You know,
can't stop the signal.
Can't
stop the signal. Hack the planet.
Hackers.
Shout out
Let's
to
add that one
Sean.
to the list too.
Sean said Olivia Wilde. That was your comment because
he was trying to
with Olivia. Yeah.
Yep, that was
so. Thank you, Sean, for that.
Thanks for the assist, honey.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much for checking us out. We episode 3 is gonna be myself and Mike and Chad. I should have called you, but I forgot. So me and Mike are gonna review Black Panther 2, Wakanda Forever, and Black Christmas, the 2006 Christmas movie.
Okay.
Because Mike had to have something to tie in the movie, so he had to have both movies called Black in the title. I don't know. Anyways, thank you guys for checking us out. Make sure you guys check out Hilda's Instagram, which is fantastic. If you are a fan of board games or of games in general, check her out. She's at Tabletop Gamer Girl. At Tabletop Gamer Girl, she reviews and does all these great things with board games. Are those the board games in the back behind you, Hilda?
No, this is the other room. The board games are all next door. But
that's right.
I'm gonna have to set up in there one of these episodes.
No, it's all right. It's all right. Just wanted to make sure. It's all right to make sure. Yeah,
there
she's.
There are
if you go to her Instagram,
on the shelf, but just a few.
Yeah.
Go to her Instagram. The library is next door.
Yeah, you got to see it. Chad, thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate it. I hope to have you back soon and often. It'd be great. You are fantastic. And then make sure to check out everything on my comedy is at Nary Signs, and I posting. And if you check out my Instagram, follow me on Instagram if you're not already. And I post clips of me doing stand-up and then other shenanigans. So thank you very much. Check out the other podcasts on the Geek Bro Network that include, but are not limited to, the Pero Let Me Tell You podcast, Child Like a Best with Mike Valdez, the What's Up Bro podcast with myself, Mike Mercadal, and Stephanie Mayer Sr., and then our friend Jeff is on a couple as well. He's on Cramocopia with Q, and he's also on Kickflix, which is the martial arts movie podcast, which is part of Movie Bros. And he's on there with Mike and myself. So make sure you guys check that out. And Shiver, the aforementioned Shiver that we talked about in the beginning of the podcast, which is the horror movie podcast. So make sure you got to go to geekbro.net. Thank you guys very much, man. That's how movies are reviewed. Love you. Bye.